Welcome to this session of the Risk and Compliance Exchange. My guest today is Rob Mathieson, the Sales Engineering Director for Public Sector at ExtraHop. Rob, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Appreciate being here. Thank you.
Our discussion today is going to focus on network visibility, because one of the things when we talk about managing risk and compliance challenges that every agency has is you got to understand what's happening on your network to then know what your risk is and to make sure you're complying with the rules, regulations, laws, and the like. So make that connection for us: network visibility, risk, and compliance. Why are they two sides of the same coin?
So when we talk about managing risk, when we talk about being compliant, what we're talking about is being able to adhere to a certain subset of rules and being able to prove that we are in adherence. So when you're talking about compliance on a network, what are the rules you have to adhere to? Do they apply to network traffic? Do they apply to personnel? And as you're looking at each one of those compliance metrics, each one of those rules that you have to comply with, regardless of what the rule is, regardless of what the compliance mechanism is, not only do you have to be able to prove that you are in compliance, but by proving that compliance, you are reducing your risk. The whole reason the compliance frameworks exist in the first place is to manage risk, and networks are just inherently risky. Take a look at your home network. You may know what you have, you may not know what you have. But if someone comes to audit what you have, you better know what it is.
On my home network, I'm not sure anyone knows what we have, so we'll just start there. But on a organization's network, a public sector, private sector network, that's hugely important. Now, there's been a big push over the last, I would say, 10, 12, 15 years to really get a hold of their network. How are agencies doing with network visibility? Have they gotten better, generally speaking, or they're not worse, hopefully?
No. From what I've seen, they're definitely not worse. But even over the last couple of years, they've not progressed as fast as most organizations would hope that they would have progressed by this point. And again, it all comes down to how they're going to deploy the technology that they bought, whether or not that technology is actually serving the purpose of giving them the level of visibility that they need, and whether or not that technology is actually being used. One of the problems that we find sector-wide, either FedCiv or inside of DoD, is here's this great idea for this amazing software, and they purchase it and it does exactly what it says it's going to do for a very finite amount of time, and then people don't use it anymore. It becomes shelfware. Either they don't have the personnel to use it, they don't have the training to use it, the people who are using it decided that they had to go home. You have to use what you have, and that thing that you bought has to be useful. And that's not been the progression over the last couple of years, unfortunately.
And connected to that is they buy that piece of software and they only use 10% or 20% of the capabilities. Then they buy something else that they only use 10 or 20% of it, and so on and so forth. So then they have this too many tools, and now we're hearing a lot of people talk about tool rationalization. When it comes to network, is that been the theme that you've seen? Is people have got to understand what's happening on the network, they've got to get a hold of their network, so they just buy too many tools, and that also impacts understanding their risk posture and how they comply with, again, laws, regulations, rules, and the like.
Absolutely. And I'll take ExtraHop for example. So within ExtraHop, we have the ability to monitor the performance of the network. We have the ability to do compliance monitoring in the network. We have the ability to do network detection and response. We're an all-encompassing network traffic analysis platform. And we take our base truth from the actual packets that come in across your network, right? Everything that's going between you, your machine, and the server that you have to access your app on, everything that's coming into your network, everything that's going out of your network. So when you take a look at the tool rationalization cycle, the tool consolidation cycle, there are a lot of tools out there that are capable of that extra 70% to get you to 90, right? They're capable of that extra 60% to get you to 80, but you've bought the tool for a very specific reason and you're only using it for that reason. My stance on it has always been, since I've joined with ExtraHop, is use the tool for what it's capable of, not what you think it can do.
I've talked to a lot of folks over the last 9 months, but even the last couple of years, where there's a big push to really both rationalize and consolidate tools, but also use them, not buy new ones. I think the whole move to zero trust, we've seen that you can't just buy zero trust. See what you have and see where your gaps are. So let's talk about those gaps. When agencies start looking at compliance, why understanding what's on your network, what's happening on your network leads to that compliance? So let's dig a little deeper into that topic, because I think people go, yeah, but I don't understand the connection. So dig deeper.
So I love that question. when we take a look at what's necessary to be compliant within any given framework, here's your set of rules and regulations, here's your set of measurements that you have to meet. And when you look at each one of those, the answers for a lot of them all stem from what's actually happening on your network. You can get some of that stuff from your logs, you can get some of it from your host, you can get some of it from your applications. And also, anybody who's good at manipulating that type of information can make that log say whatever they want that log to say. They can make that host do whatever they want that host to do. They can make that application behave in any manner that they want that application to behave to make it look like everything's normal. What can't lie is the packet. Your network cannot lie to you. Either a thing happened or a thing didn't, and being able to measure the deviations in that network signal to be able to bring the actual signal out of the noise, get you to more of the ground truth of whether or not you are compliant with A, B, and C, whether or not your risk has decreased by X number of percentage, and whether or not the things you see on the network are actually being accounted for by your CMDB software, by your antivirus software, by your EDR software. Your network can't lie to you. And that's why we use the network.
And I think once you understand kind of what's happening, then that also can understand what risks you're facing. Where are those cyber threats coming? Hey, we're seeing an increase from China, from Iran, or vice versa. Hey, a lot of our problems are internal. People are clicking on something, or they're we have that they're uploading some sort of software that's not approved. I think that's the other side of the coin.
Absolutely, absolutely. User training is paramount. And also, every user is human, right? I don't know about you, but I've clicked on some things I shouldn't have clicked on in my 40 plus years on this planet. And every single time I do, I'm reminded that I'm just human. My brain only works in a human way. So being able to have that visibility, being able to understand that, yeah, your user is going to have a problem. Yes, you're not going to train every user. No, not every user is going to use sound judgment if they want to access the thing that you told them not to access. So if you understand that the human is going to be human, take a look at what's happening on the network. Understanding how they got to that point, what they clicked on, where that traffic went, what happened after that click, what happened after that next set of data came in, that's how you get to the point of, here's how we mitigate going further. And then you have to integrate, again, with the rest of the tools that are already on your network, so that your tool set can do that extra 80% instead of just the 10 or 20 you think you bought it for.
As you talk to your federal customers and help them to understand, okay, why improving their network visibility is so important to their compliance and risk efforts, what are some of those trends you're starting to see? Where are agencies starting to head? Give me something that makes me feel better than they haven't made as much progress as we hope they would have, but they're not worse.
So there is a positive note to this. Automation, the requirements that not only the federal civilian agencies, but also the federal government writ large is putting into making sure that actions that are menial, that are timed, that are complex, are automated. There's a lot of heavy push, especially in the zero trust arena, to make sure that when you are seeing certain things on the network, when you are trying to respond to certain things on the network, those response actions can and should be automated. And we're watching the overarching trend of automation start to actually take off instead of it just being talked about like it has been for the last 5 to 7 years.
I've had multiple conversations over the years with the former USCIS CISO, and he talked about automation and how big a role it's played. I imagine as the threats continue, as more requirements are put on agencies' backs and they have fewer people, that automation is going to play a bigger role. What kind of advice do you have for agencies who are maybe just dipping a toe in automation, maybe have just started in some small areas? How can they kind of ramp up more quickly?
The first thing I'm going to tell everybody across the board is find yourself a trusted vendor who can give you the visibility you want.
Of course you're going to say that, right?
And any trusted vendor, right? It could absolutely be ExtraHop. We just reached FedRAMP authorization. It could be any number of vendors, but make sure you find a vendor that you trust. First and foremost, that's going to be able to provide you with the visibility that you need. The next thing you need to look at is making sure you've got the ecosystem already built to be able to allow for some of this automation to actually happen. And the third thing is be wary of the boogeyman of AI, right? Don't be super scared of AI. AI is going to eventually mature into something that is truly useful. but look at it with a wary eye, right? AI is not a goal, it's an enabler. So as you go through and you find your trusted vendor ecosystem and you make sure that all of your pieces are in place to allow for that solid automation, pay attention to how AI is going to impact that, and then use that as your enabler, not your goal.
In the 30 seconds or so we have left, let me just touch upon one thing. You mentioned infrastructure. Yes. Every agency has been in that modernization push to improve their infrastructure. Through the EIS contract, through other ways. They can't wait till the infrastructure is perfect, right? You can't let perfect be the enemy of good. So are there things you're seeing they can get started, of course, on small pilots, they can test things out, but are there certain things that they, from an infrastructure perspective, hey, here's a must-have and here's a nice-to-have, and that must-have is really where automation can then start, you can start seeing a difference and accelerating the use to get to that nice-to-have part of that infrastructure?
The must-have is the ability to draw packets. That's your must-have. That is your baseline capability. And most network vendors today can provide that to you. Your nice-to-have is the ability for micro-segmentation of each one of those pieces of the network. But you have to start with the baseline capability of being able to draw the packets out of the network so that there's a forensic audit trail, so that there's a compliance trail, and so that there's a base level of truth that you can feed to your vendors.
I think from what I've heard from CIOs and CISOs is that initial step, a lot of agencies are there and they feel good about it. The micro-segmentation, much more difficult. And I think they're starting to say, how do we start looking at the crown jewels and segment those out and then move from there? I don't know if you're kind of hearing maybe the same thing right now.
Very much the same. Much the same as it was 10 years ago when we first, all of us packet heads started saying, pull the packets out of the network, right? That was really hard to do back then. Easier to do now. Micro-segmentation is just the next thing that is the hard to do. But once you get to the point where you're implementing that micro-segmentation, it gets easier.
That's good to hear, because I think that's the next step. And as agencies have faced more risks and try to deal with, improve their risk postures and more compliance requirements, that's all going to be part of the solution. Rob, unfortunately for us at the Risk and Compliance Exchange, we're done for today. So let me thank my guest. Rob Mathieson is the Sales Engineering Director for Public Sector at ExtraHop. Rob, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Risk and Compliance Exchange.